Okay, I've been going through a couple of um uh, questions, if you will, from the Counter-Creationism Handbook by Mark Isaac. And the second one is on the anthropic principle. He's got a quote here from Hugh Ross. The cosmos is fine-tuned to permit human life. If any of several fundamental constants were only slightly different, life would be impossible. That's the quote from Hugh Ross, in parentheses. Isaacs writes, this claim is also known as the weak anthropic principle. The fifth objection that he brings against this claim, or sorry, the fourth one, it says the fine-tuning claim, or the weak anthropic principle, as evidence for the existence of God, says the fine-tuning claim is weakened by the fact that some physical constants are dependent on others, so the anthropic principle may rest on only a very few initial conditions that are really fundamental. It is further weakened by the fact that different initial conditions sometimes lead to essentially the same outcomes as with the initial mass of stars and their formation of heavy metals, or that the tuning may not be very fine, as with the resonance window for helium fusion within the Sun. Well, first of all, to say that the anthropic principle is weakened by there being less fundamental constants than may at first appear, um, I think that to have various constants that aren't really fundamental, depending on other constants that are fundamental, um, I think in some ways that actually strengthens the fine-tuning argument for the ways in which these pseudo-fundamental constants are interacting and depending upon the actual real fundamental constants. That seems to speak of design. But I'm not sure that Isaac here is interpreting the word, the phrase fundamental constants accurately. It says, um, it's further weakened by the fact that different initial conditions sometimes lead to essentially the same outcomes as with the initial mass of stars and their formation of heavy metals. Well, the initial mass of stars and the formation of heavy metals, uh, neither of those are fundamental constants. Uh, the mass of a star varies. Um, Different stars have different masses. Um, and the formation of heavy metal within stars, um, there may be laws that describe that process using fundamental constants, but I don't think uh, to say the process of heavy metals forming in stars, that in and of itself is not really talking about a constant. A fundamental constant would be like if we take two planets, the distance between the planets is inversely proportional to the let's see, the gravitational pull, if I'm saying this right, the gravitational pull between those planets is inversely proportional to the masses of them, uh, and it's also I think it's mass one times mass two over the distance squared times g, capital G. That capital G is the fundamental constant of gravity. Um, so those are the kinds of things that are certain, that are constant. The mass of the electrons and protons and neutrons, I believe, is as well, but not the mass of a star. The mass of a star is it varies. It's not a physical constant. All right, number five. Um, and then he says the resonance window for helium fusion within the sun. Again, that's not what constants are. Constants are certain things that are in equations that we have to use in the equations to get the numbers to work out right. To have the equations equal what the experimenters are observing, like G in the inverse square law. Number 5, if part of the universe were not suitable for life, we would not be here to think about it. There is nothing to rule out the possibility of multiple universes, most of which would be unsuitable for life. We happen to find ourselves in one where life is conveniently possible because we cannot very well be anywhere else. Well, this is a very common objection to the fine-tuning argument. Uh, and it is true to say that we would not be here unless the universe were fine-tuned. But it's an important observation to make, but it seems to me to be irrelevant because yeah, we wouldn't be here to ask the question, but we are here to ask the question: why is the universe that we find ourselves in finely tuned? Now, we wouldn't find ourselves in a not so finely tuned universe because it's not finely tuned. That's true. But we are in a finely tuned universe. We are here to ask the question. The basic counter explanation, if we don't want to say that God has finely tuned the world, the most common fine tuner, if you will, aside from God, would be this idea of a multiverse. In the multiverse, perhaps, if there is a multiverse, perhaps there's this universe generating machine which is generating all these universes. Well, the first thing to note about this, the many worlds hypothesis, and it's just a hypothesis, okay, it's not been proven. The first thing to note is that it's ad hoc. We want to save the phenomenon of atheism, so we don't have a naturalistic explanation for the fine-tuning. So we just assume that someday we'll find out that there is a multiverse with these other, with this machine or something analogous to a universe-generating machine. So it's ad hoc, therefore it's not a very good hypothesis. We're just inventing it to save our atheism. And even if there is a multiverse, the multiverse itself is finely tuned. After all, where did this universe-generating machine that follows these law-like patterns as it makes these different universes, who fine-tuned that? So it still doesn't eliminate the need for a God. Number 6, the anthropic principle is an argument against an omnipotent creator. If God can do anything, he could create life in a universe whose conditions do not allow for it. Now this is one of the, I said I think in part 1 that this book is a real doozy, and I think this is really the heart of it right here in the final objection, because what he's saying there does not make any sense. God God cannot do what is impossible. It's inconsistent to say that because God is omnipotent, he can make a universe in which life exists, but the conditions of the universe are not life permitting. But that's self-contradictory. Um, we don't ascribe the self-contradictory to divine omnipotence. God can do all things, but he can't do the logically incoherent. So to have a universe in which life is impossible to exist, for life to exist in that universe, is a meaningless statement. So um, it's not a It doesn't say anything against God's omnipotence. It's just something that is absolutely impossible. So God cannot do it. If we think of it as a thing, uh, it is a thing which God cannot do. But again, it's not a thing. It's a meaningless combination of words on the page because it's incoherent. So it's really not a thing that could be done in principle. All right, so that concludes what I wanted to say in response to this book. Really, just two small parts out of this book. Um, it's really bad. Okay, it's really bad. Um, some of the comments on scientific questions seem to be a bit better than when he delves into philosophy of religion, because that is just totally out in left field. That omnipotence can do logically impossible things and square circles and yes, it's bad. It's bad. All right. Thanks for watching. I'd like to hear your comments. I still haven't gotten a hold of the grand design. Uh, that's something that I want to be reviewing once I get a chance to read it. Um, so that's kind of similar to some of the things that I was going over in these videos. Thanks for watching. Shalom to you all, and click on the subscribe button if you haven't already. Catch you later. Bye.